literally on the phone with Instagram like last week, and I was like poking them about, well, what if one of our artists wants to take a break? And they were like, well, they can't.
That's Natasha Brito, former artist, former creative director at Sony Music, and now running Austere and Artist House. She's dedicated her entire career to one obsession: artist brands and content strategy. Frankly, nobody does it better. This episode, Natasha gives you the complete playbook: what artist brand actually means at its deepest level, and how to define and stick to yours. Why most artists are silently sabotaging their own reach without even realizing it, and how you can avoid it too.
It's usually two problems. Either your hook writing is really bad or you're cross-posting everything. And cross-posting is very detrimental. All the platforms nowadays have data crawlers that can track if something is considered original content or reposted from another platform. It's been happening since about 2021.
And the exact content system she uses with her clients to make a release a success.
Your pre-release is you're introducing the theme. Week of release is very aggressive, ideally like a daily post. And then post-release is going to be really building in different formats of content that can showcase the concept of the song.
We also get in where to post and what to post.
My trifecta has always been TikTok and Instagram as your two platforms where you should have, 2/3 of your content should be original. And then a third platform I still recommend as YouTube Shorts, where you post the crap out of everything that you post everywhere else.
If you have ever stared at your phone, wondering why nobody's finding your music, Natasha Brito has the answer. 20,000 Artists Guided, one of the sharpest minds in the industry. Everything you need to know about content and artist brand in one conversation. Here we go. Natasha, thank you so much for being here. I want to start off with a pretty direct question, which is that most artists, they think that branding means colors, fonts, aesthetic, kind of what their Instagram feed may look like. You, however, work at a far deeper level than that. So to you, what does artist brand actually mean?
Yeah, great question. Those are the baseline elements that are included in brand, but brand is so much more. It is every micro decision you make that has a visual tie to it is a reflection of your brand and the ethos, lore, world building that you have established for yourself that needs to be, again, a reflection of that and in part, like a part of that structure. So it is a holistic decider of everything: cover art, videos, socials, promo assets, flyers, fonts, symbolism, everything.
Okay. And I want to also hear about, for the viewers especially as well, your journey. So after doing a bit of research, I saw that you were an artist yourself,
Yeah.
on MySpace, if
Mm.
I'm correct. Then you were a creative director at Sony, working with some huge artists. And now you're the founder of Austere. Can you walk us through that journey and talk about maybe what you learned in all those steps, and maybe talk a bit about what you do at Austere?
Absolutely, yeah. I'll give you the highlights reel. So yes, I in the MySpace days was a electronic acoustic pop musician playing around with, as everyone was, with the garage bands of the world and just making internet music, which was really fun.
Mm.
I quickly garnered a really big audience, a lot of streams, millions of streams, and a lot of iTunes downloads over the course of a year of putting out a few singles and then putting out an album. Um, but I think my success wasn't really because of my music. My music was okay, like it was good, but it wasn't anything super special. It was more about how I presented myself. It was the branding I created for myself, my content shoots, my photo shoots, my videos, how I was playing with colors and the direction in which I presented my persona. So really, and even down to stage design and how I had props at my shows that lit up and were like literally spelled out my artist name. It was everything. So that was where I had fun. It wasn't even really in making the music or performing it. It was in the building the brand. And that attributed to my success. So then I went to college and decided I wanted to take a step back from that. I also really refused to switch over to Facebook. And by the time I finally did, none of my fans knew where I was at on Facebook because everyone
Right.
deserted MySpace. And I was like, I'm leaving. And it was an echo chamber. There was no one there. Um, So I was like, this is perfect. I don't really want to do this. I want to study art direction, creative direction, graphics. I had already been self taught in graphic design and video editing and all that stuff since I was a kid. So it made sense to go into school for that. After my senior year of college, is when I launched a magazine called Austere magazine. And I
Right.
ran that as a side project for 7 years after I graduated, where had daytime jobs as a art director at an ad agency. And then I was head of creative for socials at Pizza Hut Corporate, all this stuff that was like not really my passion, but I was still exploring my creative branding world.
Right.
And when I was finally tired of making pizza sexy on socials, I was like, I want to go back into the music industry. My magazine's really fun, but it's impossible to make print media be successful unless you have a lot of backing.
Mhm.
So uh, I sunsetted the magazine. I reached out and tried to get a job at Sony off a whim, and got the job and became a creative director over there, and moved to New York and had a blast, and came into the job knowing I wanted to leave at some point and start an agency and turn the magazine into an agency since the brand had recognition already. But also, I wanted to extract everything I could, squeeze every ounce of advice I could get from any mentor that would give me direction on how they turn random people into superstars. And so I literally had like a Google Doc that I took notes on every day when I would ask little questions here and there, and I saw how the operation worked. Um, and eventually I was like, amazing, this is awesome. I'm learning everything I need to, but I don't like how they treat musicians on the major label side. To
Right.
me, there was a very big disconnect from uh, um, like an empathy and support perspective. I felt like we weren't allowed to do nearly as much as we should for the baby artists we would be signing, and they would be siloed after maybe they didn't have as successful of a freshman album as we wanted, and then kick to the curb, focus on whoever's generating more money. So to
Right.
me, I didn't connect with that. So I started making my course, the Iconic Artist Blueprint, which ended up being my flagship course. I left Sony, moved back home, launched my agency, and since then, it was about almost 7 years now. The course has had over 20,000 students. We expanded it into a coaching program as well, and a bunch of resources called Artist House. Obviously, my agency still exists, Austere. It's where more of the artists who have the ability to bring us on as like a broader team for execution across all marketing facets comes into play, and we're just churning along as we go.
Amazing. Um, you teach something which you call subliminal narrative. Can you walk me through what that means actually?
Yeah. The subliminal narrative is the story you never tell in an interview for press. It's the fictional origin story of your artist identity, lore, world. Um, and typically is more so written like a storybook format. You're identifying the origin of that archetype, that character, the world that they're in, what that world feels like, what's happening in it, what's the mission and purpose of it, and what symbols and objects are intertwined within that drives you further into that world. It's not the starting point. The starting point is before that, but you get to this point of writing the subliminal narrative in order to inform all the visuals from there.
Got it. And to make this practical, could you maybe give an example of an artist
Yeah.
who, in your opinion, has a great subliminal narrative and maybe one that we might know of who doesn't have that?
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? Yeah.
Okay. Um, I would
Or just
say
do the good. If
there's
the
so many
doesn't is
great
if we don't want
ones.
to throw shade, then let's forget the
Well,
doesn't.
I will there's definitely one I can think of that everyone will agree with me on, but
Okay.
one that, like a good example, um, that is more recent, besides like a Chapel Roan, which is a very obvious
Yeah.
one, is the rebrand we saw from Sabrina Carpenter,
Yeah.
right? She was very unbranded for a very long time in her music career. Sure, she's been famous for a long time and she has had a team, but if we're talking about notoriety, we saw a very specific shift for her during Espresso as a release and
Mhm.
beyond, where she really honed in on the identity that made sense for her, a lane that wasn't really caught by anyone in the pop sphere at this point. The charming girl next door, but sexualized in a way because she deserves to feel sexy while still being cute, comedic. There's a element about her that is nostalgic from like a very pinup 1920s aesthetic as well that she pulls from. Um, and really, it's this archetype of like the lover and the rebel at the same time, where I really feel like she's embodied this position of nostalgia meets modern day romantic sexualized woman. And it's simple, like it's not complex, right? But if we look at another artist like a Chapel Roan who went deep into more of a drag identity
Mm.
that is very, almost alien-esque in a sense, she does a great job of taking it a way step further that's gonna be a bit more camp, queer focused, etcetera.
Hmm.
Um, Now, if we were looking at someone who has not done a really good job of this, and this is more of like a rebrand that they went through,
Yep.
my example is always, what's her name? The blonde girl that nobody likes that tried to do the horrible black sequence, video 2 years ago. JoJo Siwa, yes.
I don't even know
Um
Jojo Siwa. I'm not even aware.
JoJo Siwa, and if you were not a part of the like, hate train of JoJo Siwa's rebrand in the last couple years, you're in for a treat on TikTok. But really, JoJo
Okay.
Siwa went from being a child star, pink, colorful sequence, very childish big bows, trying to have an adult rebrand that flopped so, so hard because it felt completely inauthentic to who she actually was and the fan base that she had already built. She
Right.
tried to basically recolor, restrip what she already been doing, but with black and with almost like the Kiss bands
Mhm.
like makeup style, and trying to take it into a place where she didn't really rebrand. She didn't really grow up. She just rechanged the colors and called it edgy and then claimed she owned and she created gay pop. So
Right.
that's a horrible rebrand. It didn't work for her. She actually unpivoted back into what I think now is way more fitting for her as an adult, which is very light colored, feminine, back to her like, lightness about her, which, you know, if you didn't like her before, you're not gonna like her regardless, but I think now what she's doing is a much better fit for her. She should have just gone this direction all along rather than having a hard left pivot that just really, really made people hate her even more.
Got it. And so we've got a lot of people listening, Natasha, that are artists that are already releasing, that they've started, to, I guess, conceptualize or put out what they would deem their brand. Now they'll be listening to this and they might think to themselves, okay, I want to go about this again. However, I've already put something out there. And how does one get that right? How do I make sure that I don't end up like Jojo Siwa? And I end up doing it the right way. If I wanted to maybe make my brand more, um, how do I put it? Detailed and more thoughtful and more strategic. What would you tell someone who's already 2 steps in? Do you run digital marketing at a label or a management company? Are you the one who has to make sure that the ads go live, the creatives are ready, and the numbers get reported across multiple artists? Well, then, Roster OS was built for you. You see, a couple months ago, we launched Intelligent. It was for the independent artist, the one man army, and it quickly became one of the fastest growing tools in the space. In fact, over 6,000 artists use it today, and we've helped generate well over 1 billion streams. And now we've rebuilt it for labels and teams. And here's what it does. It combines structured meta media buying, high performing ad creatives, optimization, clear reporting, all in one system. So when a song is ready, you just plug it into Roster OS and it launches and optimizes it like a pro without needing an agency. Plus, you're not left alone with the software. We onboard your team personally, and you get a dedicated success team to keep everything running clean. You see, the truth is, a lot of agencies are already using systems like this behind the scenes and charging you a premium for it. Roster OS has no monthly subscription. It has no setup fee and no artist limits. So if you manage more than one artist, check it out now.
The most important note that I hear and I try to remind them is that you don't have to delete and archive everything you've ever done before. I
Mhm.
think there's value in showing people the journey of transformation. because people love to go back when they become fans and, deep dive into your journey and the homegrown roots of what created you and transformed you. Even an artist like an Ella Langley, who is popping off really hard right now. She, if you go back, she still has all her old content where she was not hyper, well dressed and overly conceptual and high end and had the hair that is now iconic to her. She kept all of that because she's showing the journey.
Mhm.
So keep what you have, and you have two options. One, obviously, you can have a really hard shift transition where you basically have like a visual cinematic announcement of like killing off the last version of you and birthing the new one,
Mhm.
which can be super cool and very, very awesome if done in a storytelling cinematic way. Or you can have a progressive transition where you're slowly starting to incorporate more of the colors, textures, symbols, and objects that represent the world. And then eventually you have some sort of staple moment or release that you attach this holistic identity to very, very aggressively that kind of becomes more of a soft open rather than this like hard launch.
Got it. And to sort of put this all into sort of like perspective, now, as you are, I'm sure, aware, with Suno and all these other sort of AI production platforms, sort of the bottleneck seemingly isn't production anymore. I recently read an article which was all about, I think the headline was something like, great music doesn't count anymore. It's just sort of like part of the parcel. Everything is your brand. Um, how do you stand to that? Is the brand the new product? Is that where artists should be laying the most focus on? Now, obviously, keeping in mind that great music is still great music, and I don't want to sort of make propaganda here that good music is bad and you shouldn't focus on it. But is there an argument to be made that more focus than ever really should be placed on being able to distinguish and elaborate and conceptualize what your brand is and who you stand for?
Absolutely. The challenge with AI, again, like you said, there was already millions of people putting out new music every week before AI music came into play. Now there's probably 10 times as much because accessibility of creation is at an all-time high. So the differentiator has to be, what is the visual identity and world that you've created that you're taking more effort into allowing people to experience. Music is escapism, and so if you look at it from discovery perspective, most music is discovered from social media, not usually, maybe from streaming sometimes too, but that's a very passive experience. Most of it is proactive on socials. And so the first thing they see is the visual. So if you can allow them to escape into your world, you're doing more than the person who's putting out AI music with AI generated cover art and AI generated XYZ. And unfortunately, most people who are doing that, no shade to like the creative process, but most of it looks like AI slop.
Mhm.
Even if the music is good, because Suno is basically built for music to be good regardless, the AI visuals are going to look like garbage. And so your differentiator has to be, what is your persona? What is your identity? And how are you taking people into an escapist experience or
Got it.
connecting with them in like a very deep personal level of their own personal experience?
Got it. So I'm going to try now with you to go as sort of specific as we possibly can, because we know that where brand lives. So I guess we start off by, and in ways that you also communicate, the subliminal narrative, the first step that you mentioned. But now we actually have to put that into practice, and that lives on social media. Let's assume I'm somebody who, well, I have a day job. I happen to not be an artist. I'm the only one in my team who isn't one. But let's say I'm working 40 hours a week. But I want to be an artist. I've been doing this my whole life. How do I translate your philosophy into an operating system that I can actually bring to life every day?
Yeah.
How do I make it work if I have a full-time job, if I have commitments, university, you name it?
Yeah, yeah. So let's make an assumption that you've gone through a visual identity process and you've
Yeah,
built a brand book. That brand book defines the different sections of how things are shown and experienced, right? What is the graphic design style? What textures are overlaid on photo shoots? What are the posings? What is the fashion, makeup and hair, if applicable, video editing, all of that? Everything is defined already for guidance.
yeah,
So we have that. So then the next step is thinking about, the future to come. So, are you between releases? Are you about to put out new music? Let's say you're in a release cycle, because that's more likely the most valuable piece of information.
Yeah.
If you have, let's say, just one song coming up, no EP, album attached to it, whatever, what is for your first decision is what is this song about and who is going to be the most impacted by the message of this song. Thinking about those two things will then define the content, theme, and strategy around it. Then sitting out and thinking about how am I going to bucket this into a pre-release, week of release, and post-release content strategy, right? Your pre-release is, packaging it up in a way that you're introducing the theme. Week of release is very aggressive, ideally like a daily post. And then post release is going to be really building in different formats of content that can talk about or experience or showcase the concept of the song. So the branding is the foundation in which everything has to pass the quality control check, but then this content structure needs to be formatted around the song using your world as the place in which it exists. So when we are looking at, someone who's really busy, batching and automating, that's a really big piece of this. Coming up with your entire content like calendar up front. So ideation is the first step, then looking at that into how am I gonna shot list some of this? Because some of it is graphics, some of it is statics, etcetera, but most of it is gonna be video. So making a shot list for how everything can be shot in an easier format. Okay, this is all my outdoor shots, these are my studio shots, this is my photos I need to capture, and then picking a day of the month where you can go and get all of that filmed or shot.
Right.
And then a separate day for all your editing. And then a separate day for scheduling it out on a calendar, but not pushing, you're not gonna schedule posts to go scheduled, you're gonna manually publish. But you need to lay it out so that it's clear. So it's 3 days a month that you can focus on all of this that really allow you to plan, and turn it into like a system in place that can be cyclical. And again, thinking about it from a phased approach, is really, really important.
Something we might do is I might, after this, put this into like a document which I can maybe attach to the sort of the video description, and I can put all your sort of company information on there as well. Maybe you have one of those that might be helpful for the listeners, so that
Mm,
they can really sort of see that through.
yeah.
You mentioned something there about the manual posting. This is just like out of personal interest. Is that because of like if you schedule posts, there's risk that it might be shadow banned, quote unquote?
Yeah, we've tested this with, at this point, thousands of
Yeah,
pieces of content that have gone live over the years. Consistently, content that is scheduled, even if it's done in app, will underperform in comparison to something that's manually published in real time. And it
interesting.
is even worse if you schedule and have it auto published through a third party tool like
Yeah,
Later, Sprout, Buffer,
yeah,
etc.
yeah.
So, really, you can use a tool for planning the calendar like Later, like Buffer, like Hootsuite. But when it comes down to it, push notification and live publishing.
Got it.
And that's the only pain in the ass about the whole thing, is that you
Yeah,
have to do that piece in real time. So, bare minimum best practice, 2 to 4 posts per week on Instagram. Bare minimum best practice on TikTok would unfortunately is like daily if you can, but really like multiple times a day. And that's where you just play. You get really weird on TikTok so that you can meet the guidance there.
got it. So you just actually went into what I wanted to ask as the next question, which is we've got lots of social media platforms. We've got Snapchat, we've got YouTube, we've got TikTok, we've got Instagram, and those are just the ones that come off the top of my head. There's, I'm sure, far many more. Do I post the same video that I make short, let's say it's a 30, 60 seconds? Do I post the same one on TikTok and on Instagram? Do I play the platforms differently? How do those platforms actually resonate? Like, how does TikTok work? I've heard it's more top of funnel. You know, you want to keep things sort of easy. On Instagram, maybe because people have been following you for long, you can go into more depth. On YouTube, I'm sure you have information there that people would love to hear.
Oh my god, yeah. And this is a common issue I see when people are struggling with their views and they're like stuck at a certain view rate, wondering what they're doing wrong, even if the content is good. It's usually two problems. Either your hook writing is really bad or you're cross posting everything. And
Mhm.
cross posting is very detrimental. All the platforms nowadays have data crawlers that can track if something is considered original content or
Oh,
reposted
really?
from another platform. It's been happening since about We've tracked it since about 2021. And so it's very frustrating, right? Because it used to be you could cross post everywhere, no big deal. Everyone had fair game. Now, my recommendation is it's unrealistic to post original content everywhere. So pick two core platforms and a third reposting platform that you can focus energy on. If that's too much, pick one core and then one repost,
Got it.
knowing that the repost platform will always underperform, but it's extra eyeballs. Let's call it just a bonus.
Right.
Um, my trifecta has always been TikTok and Instagram as your two platforms where you should have, two-thirds of your content should be original for each one with a small layer of reposting on the back end. And then a third platform I still recommend as YouTube Shorts. Repost the crap out of everything that you post everywhere else. That's just an extra cherry on top platform that also you can actually schedule everything on YouTube Shorts and it doesn't give you any issues with that.
Oh, wow.
So, that would be it. So, thinking about a platform by platform strategy is important. Instagram, you should have a portion of your content be nurture content and a portion of your content be exposure content. The
Right.
nurture content is meant to be, the fact that people will actually go to your Instagram and follow you and see more of your posts versus TikTok. If they follow you, it is very, very unlikely that they'll see a post for another month or two before it gets recirculated in their For You page. So, it's important that Instagram becomes that like central hub for artists to engage with their fan bases, build a broadcast channel, really, really push people there, and then take them into owned spaces from there. TikTok is just an exposure play. Constantly, you're trying to build new audiences as much as possible.
Got it. Okay, so back to my example. I'm the person who's an artist. I have a full-time job. I'm listening to this. I'm feeling pumped. I'm feeling ready. This is something I want to do, but I'm shy. I'm also worried about the C word, cringe. Not the other one. Is there any is there anything that you would I there was this quote, I can't remember, some actor said it. It was like, cringe is an untapped into sort of emotion state and something that you should dare to do more often. Is it do you get that a lot in working with artists, that their fear of maybe not being mystique, nonchalant, and trying too hard maybe for something? Do you have sort of points of advice to that?
Yeah, I hear it all the time,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because artists, want to be cool and want to seem like they're already doing well and all that stuff and don't want to feel like they're begging for views
Yeah.
or begging for attention. And I understand that. But there is a way to create content that feels organic and authentic to them without it getting to that point of cringe. Um, I do think cringe is fun. I'm a millennial, so like we grew up being cringy on the internet. We were the originals. So like I
I'd
think
say,
Gen Z and younger gens have a hard time with it because
yeah.
they've been on the internet since they were children. So it's a different mental state for them, unfortunately. That said, though, I feel like the best thing you can do is make a yes and a no list of, like, things you're willing to do on content. Are you willing to dance? No. Are you willing to lip sync? Yes. Are you willing to act? Yes. I ask this every time we're making, like, a marketing plan or doing socials for an artist because knowing those parameters is important.
Mm.
Um, because we can always build something around what you're willing to do, and if you're not willing to do anything, then our new scenario is that, okay, are you gonna be a faceless artist? And
Yeah.
if you are, what can we do to build around that makes it more creative and conceptual? Is that when we layer in AI as a visual persona? Is that when we make your entire artist identity illustrated character of yourself and then we animate that? We figure out how this can work, or do you just want to have the times that you are on camera is when you're performing, that's when you feel the safest? That's fine too. Eventually you have to learn how to get comfortable in front of the camera like you would have to get comfortable in front of an audience on a stage. It's just a muscle that you have to practice. So, you know, pretending that your friend is on the other side of the camera, your FaceTiming is like a great mental shift that most artists can go through.
And have you seen, I know that since like Instagram brought out trial reels, for example, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
that's been a bit of a, I guess, cringe blocker in a way, because you get to post cringe content, and if it gets a lot of views, you can then make it public, and then I guess if it's got views, well then if it's cringe, who cares, because it's got views to it. Um, is that something that you guys, or you tell artists to leverage, to sort of like when they're going through that posting cycle, which you mentioned,
Yeah.
throw it all into trial reels, and once it hits point X, then make it public? Or are you more of the proponent like, just post it all, don't be silly?
Yeah, I think there's certain things that should be posted regardless because you want your audience to
Yeah,
have it from the beginning. And if they're vying for you, like that's great. The best creative use case for trial reels is more so using it as like an A/B testing tool.
right.
So let's say you're doing an experimental piece of content or you think that a piece of content will do really well. You make like 5 variations of the intro or the hook or whatever it may be. Usually within the first 5 seconds, that's what you're testing against.
Hmm.
And those are the 5 that you're gonna launch as trial reels to see which one had the highest performance intake. Then that's the one that you keep on your account. Um, but that's more of the value of what trial reels are in terms of, like, high performing artists and
Yeah,
creatives. Um, but yeah, it can be a place where you can put things that you feel maybe slightly uncomfortable by because it's only gonna go to new audiences that do not know you. So it's like a safety measure, and it's essentially Instagram's solution to what TikTok already does organically.
got it. You were on a podcast, I think it was a couple of years ago, where you spoke about 3 content buckets, which was
Yes.
releases, inspiration, and organic. Um, I hear that, and I want to once again just push you to go one step further in terms of like going into sort of brass tacks. So let's assume I'm the same person who I'm pretending to be, and I make rap music. Can you maybe just give me, you know, content ideas that come to your head straight away?
Mhm.
So, if there's somebody writing things down right now and they're like, okay, I get it, but like, what do I post? I don't quite know what to post. Can you maybe give me, in this example, ideas of what I could post, which you see working well? I know it changes all the time. I know
Yeah.
that what works doesn't work tomorrow, but currently, are there things that stick out? Here's a reality most artists never get told. 60 to 80% of your Spotify streams don't come from playlists you pitch to or posts you make. They come from Spotify's algorithm, things like Discover Weekly, radio, Release Radar, mixes, all of that. So the real question isn't how do I get on playlists? It's how do I get Spotify to push my music? And the answer is something called popularity score. You see, Spotify assigns every track and artist a hidden score based on how well it performs compared to others. And that score determines how much algorithmic exposure you will get. And we spent years digging into artist data, analyzing over 1,000 careers, and we found that the biggest driver of that score is velocity. Essentially, how many real people listen to your track in a short period of time. And our software, Intelligent, exists to solve exactly that problem. It's a tool we built as artists to consistently drive real listeners to new releases, spike that early momentum, and trigger algorithmic growth. That's a game. We just made it playable. If it sounds interesting, check it out with the link in our bio.
Yeah. If we're looking at this as a framework, thinking of it in like expanding circles,
Hmm.
there's the artist, there's the lore in the world, and then there's the culture in which the artist and world sits in.
Hmm.
So your culture is the hip hop and rap culture, right? So that's you using your music to fan edits of love and hip hop cuts from that show or from hip hop and rap movies or something that might allow you to tap into cultural memes and moments where your music can be the sound bed for it.
Right.
That's the outer layer. The secondary layer is okay, if you are a rap artist, let's pretend you're a rap artist who is a part of an underground community in Detroit. Where you're constantly dealing with like some sort of enemy of some kind, and that's like the concept around it all. Then you're making content where it's a bunch of footage of you, like, constantly running away from the enemy and hiding in places, and it's breathing, and it's a lot of these, like, high concept little 20-second micro moments where you're like, "Ooh, this was like a cinematic masterpiece in 2 seconds," right? You're capturing a bunch of those in your music. Maybe it's the stems of your music, no audio, no vocals, but it's like the beats behind it are part of the storytelling that you're doing in a particular song. And then the artist content, which is your, smallest layer but is still important, is performance footage, lip syncs of different parts of the song, collabing with an artist and having them do a verse challenge with you where they're adding their own version of a verse to your song, which is a great piece of content that people
Yeah.
love still doing, so on and so forth. So there are layers that you can play with, and they're tapping into different, again, nurture versus exposure, and different layers of how people can engage with the music in completely different ways.
Got it. There, to the point that you mentioned about like culture, like resonating, and maybe your music has like an overlay over sort of movies and series. There's actually this one case study that just was on my phone still. It's a song that goes, LA, I love and hate you. And he just keeps on sort of showing like Entourage clips or Californication clips. And I'm just like, every time I'm like, oh, this is a sick edit of Entourage or Californication because I love it. And then it's like, oh, it's the same song. And it just happens again. And I checked him out. I had no idea who this person was. And his song's booming and his other
Mhm.
music is really good as well. And I was like, well played. Like that was really, really good. And I work in this space in marketing and it caught me. So that was really interesting. And then that brings me to the other point, which I wanted to get your opinion on is when Justin Bieber he went on a bit of a hiatus and now he had like his Bieber moment. But before then, I think it was when he released his album or a singer, he was like posting manically, like just all the time, multiple times a day. Do you think that was him doing that? Was that his team doing that? How intentional was that? And like, what can we learn from that moment? Because I can just remember reading so many articles with the headline of Justin Bieber posted 7,000 times in the past 2 days or something like this. And I wanted to get your take on, quantity over quality.
Justin Bieber is a marketing, like, genius in my opinion. He is very much involved in the decision making of everything because 'cause he's been in the industry for so long. So I think he had a lot of intention around what he was doing. He also knows he's kinda like doing the flood the industry, flood the feed kind of model that even politicians are doing today.
Yeah.
So it is a common practice if you're willing to go there, where you're really just pushing the algorithm over and over and over again. Quantity can sometimes overtake quality and it will still have the same effect. Going back to like the clips that you were talking about, the whole clipping campaign, there's a whole industry around clipping.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of musicians know that, but clipping is a marketing model that works. Ivory is an artist that is worth checking out. She literally built her entire music career off doing fan edits of songs.
Yeah.
And she just layered her song onto fan edits of movies and music videos and other things and whatever that she thought were really cool. Same thing with a couple of other artists. I'm forgetting the name right now, but doing fan edits that seemingly seem original by random people, aka you make a burner account and you make all of those and you put out 100 of them using your song, is an effective model if you have the time to do it. If
Yeah.
you don't have the time to do it, but maybe you have a little bit of budget, that's when you hire someone on Fiverr
Yeah.
to make those fan edits for you and clip your song onto all of those Twilight fan edits, whatever it may be, and make that account and run it like crazy, or a VA that you hire from the Philippines. Like there's models to make this work, but clipping is a format of that. So Justin's got a full team. He can have someone do all those postings for him. But from an idea perspective, I think he absolutely was a part of that decision and kind of knew that if he wants to have authority in making sure people are knowing that he's putting this out there, he's not a traditional guy. Like he isn't going out doing a bunch of interviews. He is, he wants to control that narrative in his own way. So I think it was really smart of him.
Got it. So there's another point I want to ask you about, which is we've got 15 seconds. We've got 2 seconds to really capture somebody's attention. But a song is 2 minutes, 3 minutes, four, five. How do I know what part to choose? Because there are so many examples that I'm aware of personally where simply just changing out the 15-second point from the first drop maybe to the second drop can make a humongous difference. Um, is there a way or is there a model that somebody at home can sort of like take to understand? Maybe they don't even understand like what I'm actually saying right now, and maybe you can sort of like paint that picture more clearly.
Yeah.
But a second point to that would be, how do I know what part of my song to take? Because to me, this part is maybe the best, but as we know in marketing, it's often the weirdest stuff that work. And I would love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah. I love that this part of the work so much because it's the common gut decision for a musician is being like, okay, I have to use, it has to start at the chorus, and it's the chorus, or, I'm gonna use the bridge or the 2nd verse, like, they start at this exact perfect moment where the section of the song is supposed to start. Oftentimes, it is not like that. The thing that works is picking an interesting sonic or vocal moment, and that could be in the middle of a verse or in the middle or at the end of a song or, whatever. It's not picking at a exactly perfect beginning of the verse, beginning of the chorus, beginning of the whatever.
Mm,
So an exercise that I've done and had artists do, like when we worked with Hey Violet, this amazing pop rock band that has done very well in their career, we would take a new song and look at the lyric sheets, and we would all sit down and we would listen to the song, and we would stop it every time we heard a sound bite that sounded interesting, and then we would brainstorm ideas off that soundbite that had something, sometimes nothing to do with the song. Like, interesting soundbite on the second half of the first verse. They're saying something topically that we're like, oh, this would be such a funny soundbite for if people were showing off how ugly their dogs are or how their dogs look like them or something like that. We would write down the idea. Oh, this soundbite would be perfect for a makeup transition video where people are like, their regular selves and then they turn into their nighttime goth selves or something. And we'd write that down. So going through the song, listening to it and looking at the lyrics and cutting it into moments and picking those different sound bites where it's either the lyrics or the sonic experience that is interesting is where you can come up with like 20 pieces of content using
right.
different parts of the songs. Now, should there be a priority section and like timestamp? Absolutely. It needs to be the most earwormy, most memorable. You're going to end up hearing yourself like humming it while you're doing the dishes part of the song. Sometimes that's hard for musicians to figure that out themselves because they're so tied to it. So
Mm,
asking family members and friends to say, what is the stickiest part of this song? Like what part is the most memorable? Tell me, and get like, crowd suggestions and see if everyone lands on, the same section. That's the one that's going to take priority over most of your marketing, but that's not the only part of the song you should market every release. There needs to be other parts of the songs, and you got to experiment. So, that would be my take on, like, the practice.
got it. And beyond that, and this takes me sort of, it's kind of like a ecom marketing psychology question, which is I used to do like drop shipping when I was younger. I used to sell creatine or collagen, and the interesting thing is that I will associate, let's take creatine for example, for one primary purpose, which would be related to like muscle growing. However, in recent times, we've now basically seen that creatine serves multiple purposes, just marketed different. It can help with cognitive functions. With collagen, it can be, it can make you have youthful skin, but it can also help with joint repair. And something that I discuss with artists very often is that, when they go into thinking about releasing a track, they will have their biased perspective and they will have their biased view on who their audience is. Um, how do you communicate or try and teach your artists that you're working with to think beyond that? Because if we take a 15-second clip, let's say of a rap artist, and we are showing, I don't know, 8 Mile clip, Slim Shady, you name it. Why, if you then say to him, hey, Robin, how about you try out this type of content? What do I need to understand in order for me to be like, this is why I have to do it? Because this is why I meet when I'm speaking with clients, often a bit of friction. They're like, oh, but this doesn't really match my song. And I have to kind of like walk them through the process of that. Well, there's more than one type of listener. So how does one think about, I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, are there more than one ICP in terms of audience, and how many should one have, or how many audience types should I be thinking of when promoting my song? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a hard lesson, a lot of artists that, one particular band that we worked with at Sony, that they had to learn was you don't pick your fans pick you.
Mm,
So, there's a little bit of inherent data analysis that if you already are out there and putting out music, like looking at who's already listening, that you need to pay attention to that because there will be a dominant ICP, like fan persona that fits. But secondarily, I believe that you should have, 2 to 3 fan personas that represent your fan base, and they might be vastly different, or maybe they're just different in ages or in location, but most artists hit different demos. They just don't realize it because they're center focused on the people they think that they're most aligned with because that's the culture that they live in. And so mentally they're just like, well, these are my people. These are my people because I make music like them. And I'm looking at these other artists and they're like this. So I do think I agree. There are multiple, three max, two realistically, and follow the data because again, sometimes you don't get to pick and they're, coming for I remember working with a band while I was at Sony, and they were like, "We have too many girls coming to our shows, like, we want more dude fans." And we were like, "Why are you complaining? Like, these people chose you. They're coming, they're spending money, they're your fans. Lean into them. Don't
Mm.
reject them because they're not dudes and you want more dudes at your show. Like, you obviously are making music that doesn't resonate with the majority male audience. That's okay." Fangirls are some of the best spenders in my opinion, so, yeah, there's a layer of both where you can kind of gear and you also have to have some acceptance towards who already resonates.
Got it. So I want to also now bring in some quotes or points that maybe some people in the world have said that might challenge some of the things that you have said. I wouldn't be a
Yeah,
fair interviewer if I weren't to do this.
I love it.
But Mr. Creative himself, Rick Rubin, he says the best way for an artist to be accepted is to just be themselves. And that at any time you shape yourself to what you think other people want, you're just projecting a mask. Now, your whole framework is about strategic positioning, the subliminal narrative, the content system, the rollouts. Is what you do actually compatible with what Rick is saying, or is one of you wrong?
I think he's right in one aspect of it. There is a layer of authenticity that plays into all of this, like if you take an artist like a Chapel Roan or a Lady Gaga, those creators, those musicians are authentically themselves, but they're authentically conceptual as well. They're genuinely living as the characters and identities that they've created. They've built these, but it fits them, right? It makes sense for them because they have sold themselves into it so deeply. Um, but when we look at an artist like a Cardi B, who perceptively is very authentic in herself and all the stuff, I have seen personally behind the scenes, she is extremely well versed, calm, prolific, all these things. But then in front of cameras, in front of fans, la la la, crazy, crazy, and like 10x is her personality. So, for him, he had experience with, very straightforward artists that maybe fit in that mold and it had an audience that resonated with it. But you look at Tyler the Creator and a ton of other artists, they have been able to fit into a mold of a character that still fit and made sense for them, unlike, JoJo Siwa, who tried something and it didn't fit
Mm.
like a glove. And they're allowed to be conceptual and still have a massive fan base, and they don't have to be like Lady Gaga is not out here looking like herself before she puts on her makeup, wearing like joggers and stuff. Like that's not real. That's not connective. So it has to make sense for the artist. Not everyone's going to be truly authentic in that sense.
Got it. Another point is something that we discussed a bit earlier in terms of Justin Bieber and his sort of like quantity of quality approach. Russ, he said that if he was starting from zero today, he'd stockpile 24 songs and post 200 TikToks per song. Your model is batch content one Saturday a month, find your subliminal narrative, and be strategic. They're kind of like on the opposite sides. But I do know, like, I'm kind of asking this question, even though I know the answer, but I would still like you to have your take on this.
Yeah, I was actually at his keynote at South by this year. He's a really smart guy, and he speaks to a slightly different audience that engages with music in a different way, right? Like when we're thinking about the hip hop and the rap audience,
Mm,
culturally, we can get away with different things. And that goes for every genre. What you do in an EDM space is going to be different than what you do in a jazz space.
mm,
So thinking about genre is important here. But I don't disagree when it comes to like having a ton of content. yes, you should have the visual identity piece. I do believe that, and I will always believe that. Russ hasn't a visual identity. He's literally the everyman character archetype. He represents the hustle and grind of, earning and doing on your own. He has had the same hair for fucking forever. So like the dude has a visual identity, even if it seems like he's just a casual guy. That's his visual identity. Um, but I think when you are able to maximize your content output, that's amazing. Like best practice is a lot of content. Most artists will literally burn out if they try to do that. So to me, what he's suggesting for most musicians kicking off their careers is wildly unsustainable and overwhelming. They don't
Yeah.
have budget for 24 songs to produce up front. They don't have resources and time and skills to be able to produce 200, 300, 400 pieces of content up front before even having tested to see if the content quality is up to par, because they might even not even be good editors. The video quality might be bad. That could be a huge waste of resources if they don't have an iterative flow of how they can improve. So I believe like starting off with what's sustainable for you and ramping up is a much more effective strategy and has historically led to way more viral campaigns and growth for artists in a consistent way. That's true to me.
Got it. And so I totally agree. So it's sort of like we're setting out the strategy to begin with. You're sort of like writing your business plan, and then you put it out. And then if you can maximize the output that way, great. Now, a caveat question. So let's say I'm doing that and I actually find success. The three, I know who my ICPs are, who my main one is. I know my different content buckets. I know I'm going pre-release, during release, post-release. Got it all sorted, And we've now done 3-4 releases. And now suddenly in my pre to release 5, it's maybe not going as great. And I'm starting to slow down a little bit. What do I do then? How do I go back to the drawing board? Do I have to go through a whole rebrand again? Do I have to maybe just tweak something slight? Like maybe I go into panic mode because this content type that I've been doing the whole time has been working tremendously and now isn't anymore. What do I do?
Oh, that is such a good question.
One thing we learnt working with artists is that growth is hard to do alone. And that's why intelligence is far more than just the software. It comes with a community of thousands of artists, resources, and real guidance from people who are actually doing this day to day. You see, you learn how promotion works, you see what other artists are doing, you can ask questions, collaborate, and grow faster. And that's why it feels less like a tool and more like a shared system of artists building side by side. And if that sounds like something you've been missing, you can try Intelligent now and get 20% off for life. Check it out with the link in our description.
Yeah, I think that's when you look at historically what's worked and said, okay, how can I analyze what elements of this has done well for me in the past? And if there's a common thread around format, hook style, static versus video, carousel, etc., and you can layer those out, then you start making variant tweaks across the board. Because there's a thing called creative fatigue. You know it as an advertiser. Like creative fatigue is a real thing. It happens in advertising, it happens in organic. Eventually, certain things fade out, people get tired of seeing it, and they need a little bit of new. So it could be taking yourself in the universe you've created visually and stepping into a different world in that universe versus the world you've been in. Maybe that's a color shift. Maybe that's introducing a new character in the mix or an element or a side quest or something that can take people into the next chapter of what can be exciting for them to experience. That is okay, and that is to be expected. There's a reason why musicians also go through eras, and I mean, a perfect example is Taylor Swift. K-pop community does this like a machine, but like eras are important to keep the audience excited and engaged and on to the next chapter of the journey. So sometimes that's what needs to happen. Usually I would recommend this is like see it through for every EP and or album. Like if you're in the middle of an album cycle, rework more of like your hook writing, your formats, your editing, your first 3 seconds. Like focus on the things that are more tangible shifts and throw a bunch into trial reels to see if that'll help. But I wouldn't do like a big full rebrand and reworking of the visual world until that body of work is done, because thematically that's important. Now, I will say every EP or album should have like a big idea campaign. And sometimes that means you need to throw that in towards the end.
Mm,
So, for example, we're working with it's an NDA artist I can't mention, but she's wildly famous in the acting and music space. And our big idea for her has been something loosely around the lines of going out into a major park in New York and having like a wind phone set up where people can call and talk to their younger version of themselves and share like what they've learned and have evolved into, and like these really like passionate, like very emotional moments filmed from far away. Very popular content series already. Wind phones are very like a thing, right?
mm.
Um, that is a great content series that takes you away from the artist, but it's in concept of the theme of the record, using the music as the background and the sound bed. So sometimes it's introducing something that's tertiary, that's conceptual and made for great content. That can re-trigger an audience if they're tired of maybe seeing your face in the same way or you're positioning yourself in the same way.
Got it. There's this thing that also, that people would say. I mean, I just watched yesterday. It came out. I watched all 3 episodes of the Michael Jackson documentary. I saw Michael in the cinemas, and I went through. I tend to always do this. I'm sure many people do as well. You watch a movie, you love it, and then you just go on a rabbit hole and just try and you nerd out on whatever you just saw. And I listened to a podcast, and people were saying, why is Michael still so big? Apart from the fact that his music was so amazing, et cetera, all the obvious points. And one point that was brought up was the fact that he wasn't always present. You couldn't open up your phone back then and just scroll and see, scroll and see, scroll and see, scroll and see. Um, and so that they then said, is there an argument to be made if you sort of take it to an adjacent industry? Let's say acting, right? Leonardo DiCaprio will do a movie and then typically won't do a movie for 3 years, and you won't really hear anything of him other than some young girlfriend stuff or some climate change stuff, right? But then when the movie comes, big bang. But between then, quiet, because it's sort of, I guess, you don't really get a lot of him, and that makes it more interesting when you do. um, Now, the flip side of that is that the people who will say that are already famous. So people will sort of, I hear very often artists will be like, oh, well, this guy doesn't post that often, or he doesn't do that, because they kind of built up their fan base before, it was dictated by social media. Would
Mhm.
you say that going dark for a period is something that is viable, or does one always have to be on, and that is just you're signing kind of like your life away in a sense?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because there's a lot of bad that accompanies disappearing for a period of time. I understand if there's a mental health need there, and that always takes precedent, of course, but rebuilding momentum algorithmically is like so frustrating, and it
Mm,
is like such a real thing that you have to do because I was literally on the phone with Instagram, like, last week, and we were talking about top performers and high impact performers and stuff like that, and I was, like, poking them about, "Well, what if one of our artists wants to take a break?" And they were like, "Well, they can't."
mm,
And that's the truth, and that's the truth. Like, they literally have openly said in these conversations, you have to maintain consistency if you wanna have the same visibility, and if you're a high impact creator, if you're posting, I think the number, they shared recently with us was 3 to 4, it was minimum 4 times a week on Instagram,
mhm.
then you get higher visibility algorithmically on top of that. So then they'll also prioritize your content over more people. So
Right.
it's just proven that when you disappear, you will then have to start from the ground up again, getting 300 views, 500 views, upwards of that eventually, but you have to prove yourself that you're worth being shown up on the algorithm, and I hate it. It's, like, literally the thing that makes me so sad about everything is that you can't stop, and if you stop, you have to start over, and or you have to make a new account, which I don't believe in that. I think you can always rebuild the same account, but, the best way to maintain posting frequency during downtimes is to have a evergreen content strategy, and honestly, that can be as simple as just posting statics and having that kind of if that means that's when you're scheduling things out and you don't care if it performs well or not, but you're just fulfilling the contract of posting enough, then that's when I think it's worth doing that just to, like, get you to the next phase.
Right. And so, and now tying that back to the Michael Jackson question, do you think that an artist can ever become as big as he was in this evergreen world that we live in? If I am always on your For You page, and let's say I'm like Mr. Beast, like I'm everywhere all the time,
Mhm,
but arguably Mr. Beast ain't gonna have the impact that Michael had. And I do believe a big reason for that is that, you know, it's like it was passed down from my parents and da da da. And my mum went to that concert, and it wasn't
mhm.
that I was just like seeing everything that this guy was doing. So back to the question: do you think we can have such a big effect that passes down through generations with as an artist if you have to always be present?
I think it would be very hard to imagine a world where that would be possible nowadays unless they were not necessarily like an industry plant, but they were like chosen by the label system to be the next superstar, but conceptually they're offline. And that is like what makes it interesting is conceptually that's the point.
Mm,
And they're only seen by third party accounts that are sharing experiences with them through those For You pages. It could work, but it would have to be a decision done by people who have a lot of access, a lot of connections, and it would have to be like an insane marketing push. I just don't feel like that's realistic anymore. It's almost like it's like you can't not exist on the internet today. Like
yeah.
when people are fully not on the internet, it is actually a magical experience that they're offline completely, but it's very rare and unlikely that you can build any audience just locally or,
And even if
in
it's
person.
nice, it's like kind of weird. Like,
Yeah.
even
Yeah, and
though
you're like, "What did you do? Are you a serial killer?"
it's like, even though I aspire to be you, kind of weird, dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
No,
know.
okay, fair enough. And on the topic of labels and this kind of stuff. I look, I feel like I'm a broken record because in almost every day it comes up in conversations, and I feel like this must happen all the time, right? People are just always like, "Oh, labels are losing their control," and da 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 da, and
Yeah,
Spotify's. But I guess the question is interesting to ask you because you are so focused on the artist owning and being so intentional about what they're putting out,
yeah,
and this is now going to these next layers where people, you know, they want to own their email lists. They want to own their IPs. They want to
yeah.
own. Do you see a world where the sort of like direct to fan sort of like engagement, which currently is owned pretty much by, you know, Spotify, that's where everything kind of happens. Do you think there's a world where that changes, where there's actually a new relationship born between the engagement between fans and artists? And do you have an opinion or anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think there is an inevitable shift that will happen, I don't know when, where we will see the new era of people moving away from DSPs, and they will lose their control over essentially the monopoly they've created, where they give no data, no ownership, and artists will have it will probably end up being another tool, but maybe the tool's entire purpose will be that there is data access, list, email, etc. access for the artists, where it will be just everyone will make that shift eventually. No one's happy. No one's happy with Spotify. No one's happy with any of them. So we're in a tension point that I think is hitting a peak. I literally just read a Substack article yesterday about this. And even major labels are talking about how there it is eventually inevitable that DSPs will lose completely everything and we'll move
Mm.
on to the next era of what we had, like we had before. But there will be an ownership layer to it. I don't know what that will look like completely. I do love seeing, how artists are taking control over that. I mean, even, Charlie XCX is putting out all her B-sides on vinyl. and
Yeah.
exclusively into a private Instagram that's just for her fans, and that's the only place that they're gonna be able to be visible, and they're never gonna be on DSPs, and I think that's a layer of having some sort of control and financial monetization around exclusive music. Obviously, vinyl is expensive for people to press themselves, but having a layer of exclusivity to some of your music and having those private community spaces for your fans should be a part of every artist, ecosystem. Um, because yeah, it's just very frustrating that there's nothing even for Instagram or TikTok or any of them. They
Yeah.
they don't give you all those bits of information. You just have followers, and then you have to pay to advertise to them. So
Yeah.
it's just one big a giant hamster wheel. Um,
I
I
agree.
think it's important. Yeah.
I think like there seems to be a little bit. I mean, maybe I'm biased because I literally live like exactly in this world, but a bit of a sort of like an artist entrepreneurial revolution in the sense that I do get a feeling that there's like a gusto in artists of wanting to know the tools or, oh, what is an Instagram ad or what are meta ads and data and like, ooh, whereas historically, if you were to sort of talk about anything like this, a typical artist, they have this sort of like, um, maybe this sort of fantasy of like the Hemingway in a dark room and kind of like drunk and shabby and, oh, I just fell into success, right? Like I try. And what I'm liking a lot more is that bigger artists, are speaking very openly and very clearly about it, about how intentional they can be because,
Yeah.
that's what's needed because at the end of the day, right, something that I always say is that dare to be entrepreneurial. As ludicrous as that sounds, or as obvious as that sounds, but you have to be. Being an artist that's your business. Your product is your music and your shows, but that requires all of this. You can't just be like, all right, cool, I'm just gonna write some music and that's it. And so I really appreciate when there is a lot of honesty around that. And personally, I think the best model ever was where you had your most success was the Apple Music, the iTunes, get a song for 49 cents, 99 cents if it's a banger. That was, you could go and get like 300 songs and you'd feel cool with that. And you would cherish that a lot more as well. Whereas now, I hear a song and I'm really into like electronic music and I'll hear a song and I'll love it for a day and then it's in the abyss of my
Yes.
of the liked songs and it's always looking for more and more and so you never really build up that relationship. So I agree with you. I do see and I hope to see sort of like a fragmentation. We had cable television, and then the streaming wars started, and everyone had their different things, and now they're all coming together again, and that's sort of like a cycle. They're one, then they go out, and then they come in one together. Same with the production companies, and this might happen, or I hope to see it happen in this music space as well, where there's a moment now where when Drake announces, "Oi, I left UMG," and all these other people, who are going independent, that might spark this sort of like tech revolution in the sense that we will be able to see, artists and fan engagement sort of really sort of come together again in that sense. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to discuss with you today, Natasha. I really appreciate your time. I do want to give you the floor to just promote yourself. Where can everyone find you? Where can they find your amazing work and your amazing company? I will also make sure to put everything in the bio, but I want you to sort of have that moment.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was such an amazing interview. I loved your questions, very thoughtful. We got to dig into way more interesting things than I would normally get to in a podcast. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hopefully, there was a lot of value for everyone who's listening. Yeah, my name is Natasha Brito. You guys can find me on Instagram, which is my username is Natasha Austere, just one A in the middle. And my agency is byaustere.com. My artist coaching and courses community is byartisthouse.com. We do a lot of different things. We're running a promo for my flagship course, the most recent updated version of it, the Iconic Artist Blueprint. If you want access to the discount code, shoot me a DM. My assistant will get it over to you. And yeah, just stoked to be here. I love what you guys are doing. You guys, we have the same mission of like democratizing access to growth for musicians. And I think that is what it's all about.
Amazing. I can attest to everything. I know the course. It's great.
Thank you.
And thanks again, Natasha.
Awesome. Well, thank
Alrighty.
you.